Gently, I took up the old track field to make people go to Shaver to do their walk.
Okay, we're on.
No, we're getting ready to redo all that, do a brand new field down there, and we'll repave along the tracks.
Perfect.
If you look at Jim Lag, you see all that, topsoil, it's
Yeah,
stacked up.
yeah.
That's all gonna go
Yeah,
into the
thrift
fields.
stack that. Cause I called him, one day I was walking, running over the football field, and I called, and I said, boy, you don't do it over there.
Yeah.
And I called Rush, and he said, I just called the city and asked him if we could haul dirt for him.
And perfect, if we're getting ready to redo the middle school site, so.
We got time for sewer, we talking about money now, we talking asphalt.
All right, we'll go ahead and call the May 27th Finance Administration Committee meeting to order. First up is public session. Are there any members of the public that would like to address the committee? All right. Presentation and discussion items are update on current projects.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. The packet includes the regular update, and I have Kyle Lindsay here with me today if you have any specific questions about anything. But I think, as far as I know, everything for the annual budget is scheduled to be complete by the end of the year, correct?
Correct.
That is going to be finished. We had some things that came in over our estimated amount. We had a couple things, it seemed like we had one thing that we had budgeted, and when the contractor got down there and began looking around at it, felt that it was gonna have to go through an electrical engineer. I don't know if you wanna speak to that just for a second, Kyle.
Yeah, I mean, the controls for the Conroe pump station is gonna be a whole lot bigger job than they first anticipated because of all the old equipment and all the wiring. So it's cool. They feel would feel more comfortable to go through a design firm to actually lay things out. So they just didn't feel like they could do it all in-house. So,
How much time, any idea about how much time it's gonna be?
we don't,
Take a
I
little
mean,
while.
yeah, it's gonna be a lot bigger job than initially.
Do you have any underages? Other projects that you can move towards that?
No, me and Chris has actually talked about it, but it's just a time frame. There's things that we could do, but it's hard to get things done in a month. So there's still some things we might be able to throw that money at, but it's just getting it. You know, even ordering valves or something might take a little while. So
I mean, are you gonna need a supplemental budget appropriation to cover the overage if it's gonna be, is it just time?
well, we're not. No, yeah, we're not even.
Time
It's
is the
all
issue,
about
not
time.
money.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. It's not the money issue.
Yeah, so we'll look at.
We'll
doing that
reevaluate it.
coming
And,
year.
put it back in
Understood.
the
I thought it was
project.
gonna be
Yeah.
an additional financial
No,
burden as well.
no.
All right.
Yeah, I think that one would be the time, but I think, for the most part, everything is going well. That force main on Seneca Creek, that's actually going a little faster than I thought it was gonna move. I think the railroad bore will be the next big.
Are we managing that or the contractor?
The contractor, they're paying the, I shouldn't say, I guess the developer is managing it. They're paying the contractor directly, and we have the engineering firm working under contract with us, but it's being reimbursed at 100% even for that, for inspection services. So we're invoicing.
So we have the engineers serving as our accountability agent, watching over the project.
That's
They're
correct.
managing with the contractor.
That's correct. GMC is working on that one. Richard Phillips is the inspector on that project there. So whenever we get an invoice, we turn it around and send it to Mr. Little. And as far as I know, he's been paying in a timely manner for those services. So they've been, again, I've said it before, they've been really, really good to work with. This contractor, our first experience with them has been a pleasant one as well. LW, is that?
Yeah, LW.
LW, which I think he's done some work with Senate. I'm not sure if you've worked with them before,
We're about to.
but I think we've been really happy with
Yeah,
them.
we haven't had any issues with it.
Really have been pleased with them. Any questions we have, they're on it. From the public question or comment, they're on it right away. So with that said, we'll take any questions you have about anything specific listed in there.
Are there any other questions? Thank you for that update. Action items, first up, or the only item, April to year-to-date financial reports.
All right, this was sent out by Ms. Stevens to the board on May 21st for this review. So if you want to look through that, if you have any questions about anything specific, we'll go ahead and address those. But we should be in really good shape with both our operating budgets and the restricted fund project budgets.
I make a motion, we approve the reports as submitted.
Is there a second?
That's it.
Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor of accepting the April and year-to-date financial report, say aye.
Aye.
All right, action items to recommend to the board. First up, the fiscal year 2026 budget.
All right, thank you. So I'm sure that's why Mr. Canada's here, if you'd like to hear this out. But as presented to you by email, I guess this was back a couple of weeks ago now, it was put together and sent out, was the comprehensive budget for fiscal year 2026. So the first few pages of the document that you have is the typical narrative that we put together with a description of what is in the budget, I don't know if there's anything in there that is mentioned that we have neglected to include, but this year we do have that adopted general CIP, the 20-year master plan that we are working with as well. So the last page, the narrative portion of it, you can see the list of all of those broken out by priority and what is included in the budget and what is not that we look at in the coming years. I can go over a few highlights, if you will, if you'd like me to, or if you want to just ask any questions of me, I'm open to that as well. But again, I have Kyle here to address anything that we may have specific for you.
Are there any specific questions?
Rate increase.
Rate increase is in there at 5%, volumetric only, as was discussed in
You're
committee.
projecting a 7.2% increase. Is that due to some additional growth or experience with current year?
It is. So and I discussed this with the OMP committee last week. So one of the footnotes you'll see in here is it describes how I conservatively put together our estimate for the volumetric or just user fees in general. So what we do is I take 12 months prior from starting the previous March through February, look at the number of accounts that we've had on average for that period of time, as well as the total volume that we have that's been billed through the water meters. I actually then have a little bit of a multiplier that's in the negative, very small amount, but just assuming that water meters are going to be under reading, or there may be a slight, and when I say that, is a fraction of 1% that I do this with, to water meters under recording, the economic downturn that may cause some loss of business or usage, water conservation measures that may be put in place by replacing high flow fixtures with lower flow, less of that on the residential side, more of that possibly on the commercial, industrial side of things. But with the net gains that we've had on average over the previous year, with the number of homes that have been added, the number of businesses that we've seen come in, that's why you still have the gain greater than 5% shown on the user fees.
Is that reduction realistic though, like you said, with the growth that's been going? Because we're seeing a ton
It's,
of Seneca
again,
also.
it's one of those things that it's done conservatively to not overestimate what the growth may happen. We do anticipate it to be higher with the amount of revenue that we do receive, but in preparing the budget, I wanted to make sure that we did capture, if for whatever reason, the tariffs or whatever the case may be, lumber prices shoot up, projects get put on hold. We do have a few of those, and I don't remember that I mentioned, I think I may have mentioned this at the last board meeting that we had about the number of just projects in general that I have regarding line extensions, and it was, around 30 or so. But some of those have been put on hold, specifically by the developers, saying, citing they're waiting for the cost to come down. So again, we anticipate receiving more than the 7.2% over, but just to be on the safe side of developing the budget is, we do factor that into account, but it does, does have growth accounted for based on the average of the previous 12 months when putting the budget together.
Is that something you've done on past budgets?
Yes, sir.
I don't remember seeing it.
Well, at least with the one that we have done with the water meter, the current method that we do now, the pro rata share was not done that way, but the last year or 2 years has been done that way.
How much would the what dollar amount that goes to with a 0.5% and 1/4% each?
I can send that out if you want to stick around after the meeting, I can go look it up, but it's gonna be very little, I would suspect. Like I say, I think, the footnote addresses what the numbers are. It assumes that residential usage will decrease by 1/4%, which equals 2.5 gallons per account in general. And non-residential will decrease by 0.5% or 5 gallons per account.
Okay. I don't know, it just seems odd with the kind of growth that we've seen lately. And I know you've mentioned that you've had, I think you've mentioned in the past you've had more come in versus what you anticipated since we switched to this version.
We have, but there was, I'll have to go and look, the breakdown of the user fees, but there was one time, and I think it might have been because of a billing issue or a meter reading issue, that from year 1 to year 2, we actually, I think it was a fairly considerable reduction in the amount that we had received from year 1 to year 2 because of, I don't know if it was meters that were, I don't know that you want to say misread, or there was something to do with the cycle that occurred, but there was, and it was, so there are, let's see, I'm looking here for a breakdown of it. 1, 2. So there, there's a couple of one of them with the residential annual flow, and then one with the non-residential annual flow. There was actually a reduction from the previous year based on the actual meter readings that were sent to us for usage.
What percentage was that reduction, do you remember? Or do you
One of
have-
them was about 12%, and one of them was 5%.
Any
So-
other questions or comments related to the proposed budget?
And the positions you were asking for previously are incorporated into this as well?
Yeah, so they're included in there. Just bringing up that in general, we are having as I'm sure you guys may as well too, just having a hard time keeping people here. We've had of our operations folks, which include, the true actual treatment plant operations, maintenance. And the conveyance system, we've had 7, how many total
7.
positions do we have down there? Is it 14,
Yeah.
including the supervisors? You know, half of those have turned over since the beginning of this fiscal year. Some have gone to other utilities. You know, we've lost one to the city of Clemson, a couple up to Rewa, and some have gone into the private sector and had one go work for another government entity. And just the difficulties of trying to retain those staff.
How many openings do you have now?
One,
Vacant?
is that right, Kyle?
Yeah, we just hired a maintenance supervisor, who starts, I think, next week. So I got one operator as of right now.
And we do have a gentleman that's out on
Yes.
a long-term medical. He's been generally more out than here since December.
Since December.
So we're hoping to have him back full-time pretty soon as he can get a clear bill of health from his physician. But it's been, you know, the maintenance department in particular, we've had times where we've only had one person that's been on call for weeks at a time.
Tough one.
All right, I make a motion that we recommend the budget as submitted to the full board for consideration.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any other discussion or questions? I'll go ahead and ask one, because I'm sure it's a very simple answer.
Sure.
But the employee uniforms and wellness, why it went up, is it just a rotation?
Well, what we did is, we combined a number of these to make it easier for coding for
Okay.
the staff. So we
that's one of
combined,
the ones that merged from the other?
it is, yeah, we combined, you know, for Lynn's sake and for the staff's sake when they code them. So it just makes it, just reducing some of the coding.
A consolidated chart of accounts
Yeah.
certainly makes Ms. Lynn's life easier, I would assume.
Right after just a second.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right, we have a motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Alright. And then we'll move on to schedule of fees, which I guess technically we probably should have done before we approved the budget using the schedule of fees.
Oh, that's correct.
No, he did it that way, so we're locked
I know
in.
I
No
did.
matter what they are, now we have to approve it.
Well, the big thing with the schedule of fees, you know, it incorporates the 5% that had been discussed in there that I think was kind of generally accepted. So that, you know, that's the bulk of the revenue that we do receive. The remainder of the changes that took place happened in our annual just assessment of how much it costs to treat some of the surcharge flows that we receive from industry, which is typically very small amounts, just like in here, you know, we went from 35 cent per pound to 40 cent per pound. So that, you know, that was addressed. The biggest change, obviously, was gonna be in the way we did the impact fee. So that has changed here. So it's gone from the methodology of using the water meter to the method of using the generally what is the Department of Environmental Services, what do they call it, the Appendix A, which is hydraulic loading calculations. There's a few things that we have in there that, and it's in the approved development fee that we have for calculating those. So it is referenced, but it does go back to policies that were adopted by this board, I think in 2015. And I'm assuming that Mr. Winchester presented this to make it easier for the calculations. But prior to the revision by the state at that time there was for like grocery stores and department stores and some of that type space, it was based on the square footage of the facility. And then when the state amended the regulations in 2015, it went to based on the number of customers. Well, I think it's extremely difficult for anybody to determine the number of customers a grocery store is gonna have. So back then, the board approved to keep it at that general assessment of the way it was done prior, which was based on square footage of those retail type spaces. So that's the only difference, I believe, that we have in the way that those fees would be calculated. And that was the way that we did it all the way up until we changed the methodology to the water meter size. So we would keep it, everything exactly the way we had it before, just it would be done with that spreadsheet, but using the new rate. And this does include a 3-year phase-in, as was discussed, and that does show in here. Now, you know, again, if the committee wishes to take those out and just revisit that each year, I'm open to that as well, but I did want to have those shown in here for what it would be in FY '26, '27, and '28.
Yeah, I mean, we'll still be able to review them annually, we'll have to approve the schedule of fees with the budget, so those adjustments is necessary, but putting in a 3-year phased plan approach is fine.
The question did come up, Allison McCullough and Dalton asked this question. The way that restaurants are handled is based on the number of seats that there are. And as a restaurant may go and elect to add seats on their own, I was asked, are we gonna have to start going back and counting the number of seats in each location every time we went out there? Now, I think that the way it used to be done is that, you know, we weren't doing inspections, you know, with the FOG program, we were doing inspections of facilities every so often to count the number of seats. I don't want to really
It
start
was
doing
based off the
that.
seating capacity, regardless of how many tables they put in there.
It's the number of seats that they have. It's not based on the capacity. But I don't know that we want to get back into really going in and counting
I
seats
know
in
building
these
codes
locations.
calculates it based on the capacity of seating, you know, the area available for seating, and what that sitting capacity would be in accordance with, you know, fire code.
Well, sometimes you have outdoor seats that isn't even part of that. So the question is to come up, how do we do that? So my thinking with that is that we don't, unless there's gonna be like a fundamental change with the building itself that would require a plan review, that we look at that at those times. It, would be.
I mean, normally when they're opening up, they're gonna maximize the number of seats they can get in anyway,
Mhm. So that's my fault, but that's the way it is this per seat, whether it's at the bar, at the, the sit-down portion of the restaurant, indoor or outdoor. And that's the way we did go back and calculate that. And then the same with industry as well, that is based on the number of employees as stated in their permits. So it used to be that when Allison or whoever the pre-treatment coordinator was prior to the change we made would go out there, we would count the number or ask them for the number of employees that would work. And if there was an increase, it would require an update to their industrial pre-treatment permit. And then also they would pay impact fees if they added employees over the number that was included in their permit. And again, with that, we can adjust that annually when we do the permit. We can just ask for the total number of staff that they have position-wise. But again, those are the two questions that I did have from staff as to how we would do that. And again, I think, certainly with the restaurants, the food service establishments, for the time Dalton would go in there and do his inspection and have to count the number of seats, I just don't think it's worth our time doing it, bill them if they had another 4-seat table to go and charge them the additional fees for that, when that does occur.
Thoughts, suggestions, comments?
Does everybody follow that approach?
Initially, you were hesitant about using the DE as Exhibit A as the method of calculating. Initially, you were, but then you're still okay with using that. You were concerned about the workload and the calculations and.
I'm fine with the way we're doing it now. I think, I'll put together and put the burden on on the builder, developer to provide that
Okay.
to us. We'll have them sign it, kind of certified. We'll just do occasional spot checks to make sure that, you know, the information they're providing to us matches up with what they've submitted on the sheet.
Okay.
But no, I'm fine with it. I'm, you know, when you propose doing that, I'm good with it. It is, from our standpoint, it is time consuming if we have to go and provide those numbers ourselves. But in speaking with Scott McLean, even Seneca does it the same way. We'll just provide that same information to him as well and make his job easier too.
All right, I make a motion that we recommend to the full board the schedule of fees to support the annual operating budget as submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right. And those will be at the upcoming board.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct, and they've already been advertised as required. They've been advertised in the paper, on the website, and it'll be going in the paper again this week and on social media as well.
All right. Next up, executive director's discussion.
I only have just a few things that I thought of after I put the agenda together, and one of these has to do with impact fees. We have a church, and I may have spoken with you about this, Mr. Mulder. I know I have with Scott McLean, but the current way we do now, which, you know, assuming this is approved, will expire June 30, is for water meters. And we have a church that's located, and their engineer called for an 1.5 inch meter. And the city of Seneca doesn't use an 1.5 inch, they use a 1 inch and a 2 inch. Well, I hate charging them an impact fee based on a meter that is called for, that they don't stock and install. So I've delayed us doing this pending a change to the schedule of fees. And at that time, I didn't foresee changing to the way that we did with the going from water meter to the number of seats, which is what the church would be based on. So I was gonna write it in the policy for consideration to allow us to have alternate calculation methods when situations like this one arose. So with this particular church, what my plan is to do it based on the new methodology, but to use the current rate that we have now, because I've been the one to delay this. But they've been issued their building permit, and they've been happy with doing that, knowing that trying to get this addressed for them so they're not having to pay an impact fee based on a 2 inch water meter when they don't necessarily need a 2 inch meter. So that's just one update that I have. The other item is, and I know Mr. Mulder's heard about this one, but about the number of odor complaints that we received back from.
I'm just happy you're getting them now instead of just us.
So, we.
Misery loves company.
Oh yeah. So we had 4 representatives from the Cross Creek community who's, you know, on the other side of the creek there, show up at the O&P committee. You can go and watch that. It's maybe half hour long or so that we had an open discussion about it. But in general, we think we know what the issue is. There's no way to guarantee it. But back, when was this, Kyle? The first part of May, we got a phone call from another privately owned treatment plant along I-85, and they had someone to dump some cleaning solution down the drain. And I think it's what, is it a 500,000 or 250,000 gallon a day treatment plant? It's a fairly small treatment plant that they have, but it killed the biological process at the plant. So they needed to get their plant back up and going again. So we accepted the material. We basically swapped them out. We were able to work in their tainted product, and, you know, by diluting it with our larger facility, able to help them out. Well, the only thing I can think of, that not just me, but Kyle and Johnny, the plant operator, could think of that it could be, was that product that we accepted was what was causing the odor. the complaints essentially stopped the day after we received the last
Stock receipt.
batch of product from them. The complaints in general didn't stop because we had people contacting us, just, why does your place have, why does it smell? But it wasn't about a particular instance in time, it was just kind of general complaint. I know that a notice was sent out to the residents there of how to file complaints and, how to go about doing that, how to contact Department of Environmental Services, so they were aware of it. They came out and investigated as well. And, but I think that we handled it as best we could, which, there really isn't all that much we can do to handle it, but we were asked, I was asked back when I think you were off, if we would, or no, you were here. They asked to take, if they could bring 15,000 more gallons of it. This was last week, early last week. No, we're not gonna take any more of this. I think we learned a lesson. We didn't know that what happened was gonna happen anyways, but I don't think we'll be doing that much anymore.
No good deed ever goes unpunished.
That's right. That's right. So that's the matter. That's what happened with that. And if anybody wants to know anything more about it, I've typed up a summary for our file here, and then DES asked for a copy of that. So we provided that to them. But that was, of the three things we thought of that could be a consideration, that was the one that seemed to be the most likely source of it.
Have you heard any more?
We,
People fussing about it. I got an email too. I mean, I was wondering.
that, no, we haven't heard anything other than those general calls we got, and, Kyle and primarily Kyle, but I think Johnny too, have been troopers with the whole thing, because the first, I guess, I don't know if it was the first day, but one of the first days early on, they received, I think it was 17 complaints the same day, and we were typing those up as individual complaints. Well, I think since we received so many, I just directed them, just enter, from here on with that situation, as long as that situation carries out, just create one complaint and just document all those that notify us individually within that complaint. But there was one lady that came to the meeting the other day that said she did not receive a call back or something like that, and Kyle was out on vacation, just got back today, so I'll talk to him about it to find out more about it. But I think that you spoke to most everybody, and everybody seemed, when I spoke to a gentleman the day that Kyle was out, everybody, the ones I spoke to and the ones that were here the other day seemed to understand what was going on, and that, I think if nothing else, we learned a lesson about, trying to help people out. But I don't think any of us expected what happened to happen. But I don't think we'll be doing that in the future.
Any other items?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Committee member discussion, is there any matter that we would like this committee or the board to consider at a future meeting? See, the next few meetings is June 24th, works for everybody?
24th works well, but the second, that's Scamps in conference. I'll actually be there. I don't know, do you know if Mr. Bronson's going to Scamps or not?
I'm not positive either, I know we got some other folks going, but I don't know if she's going.
The only thing with that is that's the date we've been advertising for the public meeting. So would it be possible to call in?
Yeah. I forgot we.
Because that would we've allowed that now.
Yeah, I
You can
forgot that.
participate electronically.
Yeah, I can probably do that.
Any other business for the committee? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye, and everybody